resume with WXReplication from Fabrice Harari, session number 2.
We stopped before on the first look on the different projects that you have in WXReplication. When you download the archive, make sure that you have at least version 0.92, which is the latest at that date. You will find in that zip 4 different zips. Each of them is the backup of one project. As I was telling you before, you have 2 for WinDev, 1 for mobile, and 1 for WebDev. And these are the main windows of each of the projects. Here you have the WXReplication example. That's the one that is going to be replaced by your application. So it's just a data management program, regular. It's just using my classes and all my code to do what it has to do for the replication. This here is the Android client. As you can see, I was really crazy on the graphism and all that. So that's the main menu, and we're going to go in detail in all that. This one is the web page, maintenance page. And this is the main window of the replication engine, the Windows replication engine. This appears just a few seconds when started, and then goes directly into the sys-tray where you have a menu that allows you to access all the functions, and it's running all the time. So you can, what I'm doing on my side is I have the 4 projects inside one directory in somewhere. So I have everything at the same place. Now, this morning, Pete was saying that he's more and more putting all the projects in one. And that's something that I tried to do a few years back, and that I decided that was not such a good idea. One of the main reasons for that, if you have everything in the same project, you can test only one aspect of the everything at a time. And for any system where you have several projects, you will probably at some point have some kind of communication between the different projects, and you will need to test them at the same time. You can't do that if they're all in the same project. So for this project, I had to have everything in 4 different projects so that I was able to have the 4 projects open at the same time, look at the code in the 4 projects, test the 4 projects at the same time, all on my machine. And you will need to do the same if you want to make replication work. So step away from the idea of putting everything in the same place. In that case, in particular, it's really not a good idea. For the same reason that I have 4 projects, I had to duplicate all the classes and procedures that are common to all the projects. There are several classes that you will find exactly identical in all the projects. I could share them, but if I share them, again, I cannot open the source on both sides at the same time and do changes either on that side or this side. So I had to duplicate everything and to make sure each time I was making a change that I would propagate those changes to the other project. So this setup is quite painful, but it is the less painful of all the setup I could come up with. So that's how it's working. Now, we're going to look at the different windows and all that, and I'm going to show them to you as screen grabs. After that, I'll do a quick demo of the whole thing running so that you see how you can test. That's the Windows example, which means that it's just an example of program, and you have access to files and tools in the menu, nothing there. The first thing that you have, that you will see when you run that for the first time, is this. This is an Init wizard that is included in the Windows client because it's standard in my classes. And when you start it, It's first asks you in which language you want to work, then change language accordingly, and ask you how you're going to work on your data. If you're saying I'm working alone on my computer only, it's going to set up a hyperfile classic database. If you're saying that data must be shared with other people on other computer, it's going to ask you a question to connect to a hyperfile client-server database. So that's all. It's a very simple wizard. I have that in standard in my programs. That is included in the project. Has nothing to do with replication, but knowing where your data is and how to configure it is quite important when you're working on several databases. And when I'm testing this system on my computer, I have in fact 3 different databases. One in the Android project, test mode on the machine. One in the Windows client, that is used also by the replication engine, and one for the WebDev project. So when I test that on my machine, I in fact do replication between 3 different hyperfile database, client server or classic, on my the same computer, which is kind of fun. Also in the Windows client, if you go in the file menu, you will have the file inspector. That is just what Glenn was talking about the other day. It's an empty table with a build browsing table instruction used to display any file in it. This doesn't want to be a perfect data management program at all. This is just a way to access the data, see what's in the file and verify that it's working. And there are a few forms to be able to enter data without any control. That's just a canvas to enter data and check that everything in the replication system is working. That's all. Do not think that this is great code for any kind of management system. It's not. It's really the really test system. So you have the file that you want to display, starting at what date you want to display the data, and it populates the thing. And you can see that in the project file, I have a blob with an image in it. And I did that specifically in 2 files to make sure that the replication system would work properly with content inside blobs in the file. You have the new edit and delete button. And when you use them, you arrive on a form depending on the file that you're working on, of course. You can see that it's really a stupid form with a browse button to select an image, nothing to it. It's just a way of modifying data and seeing if the replication system is pushing the data somewhere else. Now, that is an interesting window. This is a system that allows you to generate random data in your files, the file data application, in order to emulate one or several users creating data at a specific speed. That allows you to start a client, that client on 5 different machines, virtual or not, set, okay, this guy is going to create that many records per minute, and it will wait, create, and you will have the replication engine that is going to push that everywhere, and you will be able this way to test load your replication system and verify what's happening when you have 5, 10, 50 people simulated. Now, in order to simulate that, you're going to tell the system how many records you want to create in each file. You're also going to tell the system how many adds will be done for one edit. Because depending on the situation you are, you're going to have a system where you have 20 records added for one edit, or 5, or so it depends on the situation you are. So you can set a ratio here. And the most important thing is here. I estimated, or guesstimated, however you want to put it, that one user in an office environment is going at a maximum to create one record every 45 seconds during the day. Okay? So just, you're in the office, you're using your program, and said, okay, one user every 45 seconds is going to create one record. That was my estimate. You don't have to follow it. Here you have a remainder of the value you have to enter here if you want to simulate one user. If you simulate one user, you put 4,500 in there. If you simulate 5 users, you put 900. And in that screen grab, it was set up for 5 users. So at that point, there will be a record created every 9 seconds. 10 user, 1 record every 4.5 seconds. 100 user, 1 record every 0.45 seconds. So if you put 45 over there, it's number of hundred of seconds, you will simulate 100 user hitting the local database by creating record and editing record. So you decide what is the local load of the database, and the replication engine is going to send whatever is available to the server, and you're going to load your system this way. Of course, these numbers are for an office environment. If you have a point-of-sale system, if you're selling your system to Walmart and your pill in Black Friday, I'm guessing that the lady at the register is going to create a little more than that. But that is, of course, you can simulate it by changing the number here. I needed to have something to give you as an example so that you could decide what to do afterwards. So when you run that, it will use random data to fill the record, including images and all that, and create, edit. There is a known bug here. If you're putting a value that is too small here, in some cases, the random generates an incorrect value and it crashes. Never had it if I created at least 5 records per each, so that's not a lot. But if you create 2, you may be in trouble. Didn't have the time to look for detail like that. Just create more record, that's all. Now, this window is also quite important. Currently, there's only one function in it, but then there may be more in the future. Some functions in W language are not available in Android. Because of that, I had to find some workarounds. And by example, HList file, for an unknown reason, is not available on Android. HList item is. If you have the name of the file, you can get all the fields, but you cannot get the list of files. So what I'm doing here, when I have my analysis on the Windows side, I come in that window, click on the button, and this creates a very small text file that is going here, and you put it in the directory of your Android project. And the source of the Android project, I have an include, and this include that file. So automatically, I get my list of files for the Android side, and then I just created a global procedure on the Android side called HList file, and guess what? It just overwrites the regular function, has the list because it's in the source now, and returns the list correctly for any code that is using HList file being in my classes. So that's a little trick. We'll see that you'll see that there are other tricks, a little more complex than that, for other functions that were also not supported. But it's important. You will have to do it once in your project to have the correct list of files. So that's the replication engine. When it starts, it displays this beautiful logo. Isn't that great? I didn't draw it, of course. And then goes down in the sys tray, where it displays the same, much smaller. When you click on it, you have a menu. open or quit, that's all. And when you open, you get that window. Now, in that window, we're going to see what everything is doing. That test is exactly what it says. It's just a button that goes on a place where I put test thingy and allow me to check what's going on and debug and all that. So you never know what you will find behind that. You never know. I don't remember. I don't care. It's just for testing. You delete it before you ship your project or you make it invisible, whatever. Information. So you saw that we're going to go through all of them in order. When you click on information, that's a little trick that I have also on the Windows side. It's something that I like to put in my program, at least to be available in test mode, very often and more than that. I have a simple window that is calling methods in my generic classes. In particular, it is asking the data access class, what are you working against? And the data access class is saying in that case that it is working on a hyperfile classic database and that it is in this beautiful directory. And I find that it is extremely important to always be able to say on which data set I am working. Because I've seen a number of times people saying, I don't understand. I enter the data and it's not there. No, it's not there. It's here. You're just not working against the correct database. Not the one you're thinking even. So I have that as standard in all my programs. You get that with everything else. If a user is logged in, you also have the information. Because the system is going to automatically, if there is a login, write that information as created by or modified by. Okay. You have the same init wizard that you had in the Windows. Yeah, we're in the Windows engine. So you have the same init wizard because the engine itself has to know against which database it is working. And at that point, of course, it needs to work against the same database than your program so that it can get your data and send it. So that is just pointing to the same database. Now, this is the history of the replication as written in the replication file. Everything about the replication, all the magic that I'm doing for the replication is in one file. I don't have 10 files with different things. Everything is in one file called WXReplication. So in it, you will have the data that is sent back and forth, but you also have the replication administrator. You have the history of what's happening. You have the current replication information. You have all the pointers. Everything is in that file, completely self-contained. So here, it will tell you that at this date and time, the replication with this GUID was processed. That's just the beginning. Currently, there's no status saying it was successful or not. Of course, currently, it's always successful, so there's no reason why I would bother with it. But that's just the beginning, and it's there. One thing that you have to understand, at this point, all these date and time are in UTC, not local time. I didn't do the transformation currently. And it is also telling you when the next replication is going to happen in 3 minutes, 20 seconds, 3 minutes, 10 seconds, and so on, depending on your settings. Currently, when I did that screen grab, it was in manual mode, so there's no information up there. And you see that here. All that is in one, I'm using planes, so all that is in one window. Nearly everything is in one window in there. This is the user management. So that's not the users of your application. You manage your user any way you want. Those are the people who are authorized to do some kind of setup at the replication level. And because I don't know what your application is doing, how, whatever, this is a completely separate set of information, and it is stored in the replication file also, and it is replicated between database too. So you create a user here, it's going to go to the server, it's going to go to the Android client, it's going to go everywhere, and everybody will know who has the right to do any kind of modification in the setups. So this is telling you info what this window is doing. And after that, you create a new user, you delete a user. Or if you have user directly, you just click on it and you are in edit mode here and you can save. So it's a very simple system. You will see here that currently manage 3 permission is allowed to manage the engine's user, so to manage this, is allowed to manage the databases, enrollment and all that, and is allowed to manage the whole group. So there are 3 levels currently, covers everything I need for the moment. We can improve on that at any time we want, of course. Then, this is the database management and specifically the database enrollment. You can see that on this system, there are 4 database setup. Android in test mode, in Go mode. My Nexus 7 hardware in Android 4.4.4. The old Android in Go mode, and Windows in test mode. Because I was working on different setup configuration, I had this 4 database. This is the database identifier. Each database has its own GUID, so I always know which database does what. And this is the status of the database. And you can see here that 3 of them are active and 1 is blocked. Here you have the same field that allows you to modify this kind of setup. Which means that yeah, we'll see that later. Yeah, in the previous screen, there was also a details button. That's the generic settings for each database. And if you want to go further, you can by saying, okay, for this database, for the database that is on the Nexus 7, these are all the files. I am going to publish the data from that device or receive data in that device for that file. That is where you select what is going there. And at that point in time, it is only at the file level. We don't have anything finer saying only this set of record, all that. That part is not coded yet. And there are many different ways where it can be set. So basically, that's what you get here. We'll go in more detail later again level by level. I'm trying not to drown you too fast. This is the pane where you can manually start a replication cycle. And at that point, you will have information coming in. The newest information is there. It's always visible, and the oldest goes down. And what it's telling you, it's the verbose mode where it is telling you, okay, I'm trying to connect to the server. I connected to the server, connection was accepted. I'm preparing data, I'm sending data. Data was received by the server. I'm asking for data. I received the data, I process, and so on and so forth. And here, by example, asking for data, I'm forwarding the packet that is the query to the server. I'm sending that request to the server, unfolding the packet. There is no more data on the server. Okay? I want to disconnect from server. I'm formatting the packet to tell the server to disconnect. I'm sending the request to the server, and so on and so forth. So this is where you can check that the whole replication cycle is working properly. And that's where also you will have the details of any error occurring that is displayed here. Either on the client side or returned by the server. The View HTML button is a little trick that I added, because in some cases there is an error that is not coming from my replication engine. It's an error that is coming directly from the web server. The web server cannot work, WebDev is not started, whatever. And in that case, I'm not receiving my regular information that I can format and show correctly. I'm receiving an HTML page. If that's the case, you just select the HTML here, click there, and it displays the HTML as an HTML page, and you can read the damn thing without squinting too much. This is the maintenance pane. As you can see, there's a small button here, extremely important. Empty all files. Be careful because it does exactly that. It will delete all records in all the files of the database. Why would you want to do that? Well, because when you're testing replication, you're going to generate record, transfer them, check, not working. Modify something, delete everything, generate record to start from scratch, and start again. If you have a problem in the enrollment, you're going to do the same thing in order to restart always from the beginning and be able to test from A to Z, the whole process from the enrollment of the database, the first time you connect to the transfer of data is working. So you will need that a lot. Then here you have the button for the checking how many records you have in each file. So that's the first level of control. If you have 10 records on that database and 15 in that one, either you haven't done the number of replication cycles to get all the data, you stopped before all the data was there, or you have a problem. So that's the first level. Second level, this will return you a list of CRC's value per file. All the files of the database, it will tell you the CRC of the file. The WXReplication file, my file, will always have a different CRC in each database. It's normal, because it's not one of your files, it's one of mine, and then doing some crazy gymnastic in it in order for everything to be okay. But they're not the same. Each one is managing its own data set and this and that. So all the others should be strictly identical, as long, of course, as you're not doing any selective syncing. If you're not sending the data from that file to that database, then the CRC for that file is clearly going to be different. So you're probably going to get into that one. I did. It's not working anymore. Oh no, I just deactivated the syncing on that one. So yeah, there are 5 more records on that one and on this one. It's normal. And that is a button. It is. It's written on it, so it's a button. And you can completely forget about it. It's just a test that is there because I had a problem and I needed to do some treatment, and that is going to go away soon. You can see here that when I did the screen grab, it was disconnected. In that engine, you always have the high-level status of the engine, requesting data, sending data, disconnected, connected to server, waiting, all this kind of thing displayed in the corner. Now, the Android client, as you can see, we have basically the same thing. The file inspector, a way to generate records, how to synchronize data, and the maintenance. So that's basically the same thing that you have with Windows. Except that here you have in one program what you have in 2 programs for Windows. This is the file inspector. There's no table and no build browsing table in the Android. So this is done with a looper with a few fields that I'm populating by code depending on the file that is in it. So it's kind of ugly, but it serves the purpose of being able to check which record is what, and then do an edit to see the detail of that specific record. And when you do an edit, this is what you have. Same thing than the other side. What I did not do is the browse button to add an image by hand on Android, because I didn't want to go there and spend time on that. But if you use the record generator on Android, it will add images randomly. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And that's perfectly normal. That's on purpose. I wanted to have both cases available. If you create a record by hand, you will not be able to add an image to it. The record generation, that is exactly the same thing. There's no difference. The same code, the same button, the same everything. Just smaller. The replication, exactly the same thing. You have a start button, it's on the other side, okay? And you have the same information here. Here you can see that try to connect to the server, sending the request to the server, unfolding the answer, and connecting to the server file, blocked by server. Please contact your system administrator. In the system, you have the possibility to say, this database is now blocked. Won't be able to publish anything or to receive anything till somebody who's using it contact me and pays license, kiss my ass, whatever it is that you need them to do. Here, you do it. You block that database very easily. It can be simply the fact that a laptop was stolen, block. I don't have currently an erase the database, which could be a security feature where the first time somebody tries to get data when they are blocked and in erase mode, it would just format the whole drive or whatever you want you do. Well, if it's stolen, it is perfectly legitimate. Of course, if you do that to a customer just because he didn't pay a license, then it's entirely up to you to pay your lawyer and do all this kind of thing. But it is something that you have to think about, especially with Android on the phone and tablet. It's something they are going to be stolen. Then you have the maintenance pane. You have the same thing, empty all files, info and database CRC. You also have here a reindex database, simply because at some point I was having a strange behavior and I didn't know if it was me or the database that was corrupted, so I added the reindex. You can do that very easily via the HF control center when you're on the Windows database, but when you're on an Android tablet, it's a little more difficult, so it's there. Everything else, it's a set of fields that I've been using to understand why I was having a problem with Android. And I finally found out that it's due to the implementation of the concatenation of string in the Java compilation made by Windev Mobile. Anybody understood that? No? Good. There is one problem currently in that implementation, is that the process is much, much slower with Android than it is with Windows. And I couldn't understand for the life of me what was going on, and I finally with this tool was able to get it. In Java, and remember that all the things that happen with Android is translated to Java, you have two ways at least to do string concatenation. String equal string plus string. That's the basic concatenation. And then you have a function, concat or whatever, I don't speak Java, that does the same thing. And the reason for that, the classic concatenation is horribly slow. It's awful. Spend this time allocating memory, deleting. So they created a much faster way. And compilers are not required, but they're telling basically, compiler, you should use the new function. It looks like Windev Mobile is not using the new function. And currently, I didn't have the time to contact PCSoft about that and see if they were doing something or if there was a way around it. So I found a way to minimize the problem by minimizing the number of operations I was doing, as it's a mess. And in the future, I have two ways to explore. One is to have that solved by PCSoft. I'm not holding my breath because it's just a question of performance, and I may be the only guy who's doing heavy string concatenation on Android. The second is to translate the part of code that I am using and that is creating that problem directly into Java myself the right way. And this is in the RC4 encryption system. So if I don't want to encrypt, it goes fast. If I encrypt, it goes slow because you have to take each byte one after the other, encrypt it, so it's a very heavy on the string concatenation. So this is a problem that should go away with version 20 because I will not be using the RC4 anymore. But till then, I have a performance problem on the Android side. It is known. You will find it in the list of bugs that I maintain on my website for the WXReplication. If you go on my website, menu, open source, WXReplication, everything you need to know, you have a list of articles. One of them is list of bugs. There are many other things, but this one is listed in it, and you will understand exactly what's going on. So all that was for me to test what was going on, understand, compare things, and see how I could optimize the code for now. This is the WebDev part. This is there's nothing to see in the connect page, the one that is used by the engine. That is the one that is user-oriented. That's the maintenance page. If you are on the general tab, you have, again, the empty all files, number of record per file, and calculation of CRC. You need to have that everywhere in order to be able to compare the Android, the Windows, and the web database. So you have that everywhere. And if you go to the database management tab, you have basically the same thing, a little less detail, that you had in the Windows engine. Now, why is it duplicated? I don't like to code things twice if I can avoid it. But one thing that you have to understand in the enrollment process is that a client is asking to be enrolled. It goes on the server. If you don't unblock it here, it's not going to go anywhere else. And therefore, the Windows client cannot do the initial enrollment. It can modify the status later, but it cannot do the initial enrollment. It has to be done here. So we'll go into that in much more detail later, just to give you an idea. Yes, one thing that you want to know maybe already now, you have the status, the short name, and this is an information string. When the client tries to enroll, it is sending as much information as it can. So under Windows, it's sending the fact that it is a Windows machine, that it is a Windows 7 machine, that the name of the user is Fabrice, and that the name of the computer is Apex. Under Android, it is sending the fact that it is Android, the version of the system, and the IMEI, I don't know how you pronounce that thing, the identifier of the phone or the tablet. By doing that, it allows the guy on the other side to say, okay, that's the tablet of this guy, that's the Windows of that guy, and give it a proper name. Of course, that could be done on the client side. Then you would rely on the user to give a proper name to a database, and that may not be the best of ideas. Here, I show you the same screen, but I open that status combo so that you can see the different status that are available. Not enrolled yet. A client has asked to replicate. Up till now, it is not authorized. Active. Synchronization will happen every time the client is asking for it. Paused. That's a status that is not going to request the user to do something. It's just that you have to reset your server, whatever. So first you can pause everybody. Blocked. We saw that before. The user is going to get a message saying, hey, contact your administrator system because there's a problem. And dump mode, that's something that we'll go into details later. That is the magic trick that allows existing data from several databases to be merged the first time you start a replication system. Okay, this is how it works. So that was the first look to the windows themselves. And before we go into that, I'm going to try to show you if it wants to work. Let me see if I can do that. When you want to test something like that, you need your web server, your local web server, your local test web server to be started. So the first thing you're going to do is go into your WebDev project, which is there. You see my, yeah, there. And you're going, excuse me, I'm old school. And you're going to run the maintenance page, by example, for only one reason. It's not that you specifically want to do any maintenance. It is that you want to have this coming in and started. This way, this is your, in fact, WebDev server, your local test WebDev server. It's called WebDev Administrator, but in fact, it is the server itself. If that is started, then the AWP page can be called by the other program locally on your machine. If it's not started, there's no WebDev server. So once you do that, you have, of course, your page coming up. But that is not really important. You can even close it. The only thing that you want is to have the WebDev administrator started. At that point, if we take the, by example, the Android client and do a test too, I'm just clicking on Go, so I'm not showing you the thing. You know how it works. I'm just going to show you the result. And if that is the Android client in test mode. If I go here and do a start, it did a whole cycle of synchronization with session ended correctly. There was no more data on server. It had nothing to send. It's just an empty cycle. You have the date, you have the time, and you have all that visible. So I can do that at the same time with my replication engine. I'm going to start my replication engine. I'm going to try to show you that here. Okay, did it here. Now, it displayed on the first screen, so you didn't see it. Here I'm clicking in the systray on the icon, doing an open, and pulling that over there. That's the window that you saw earlier. Now I'm just going to go into the replication and start. And it's doing the exact same thing, except that is the Windows client. And all that is talking to the WebDev test server on the same machine. So here I just show you the synchronization between 3 different databases on my test machine. And that's how you test this kind of thing locally. And the only difference between testing this locally and testing that on a server is that I don't have to publish my WebDev pages, and that the URL that is used is on localhost or on a local IP address, because you can do that from the computer in this room. If they have access to my IP address, they can absolutely do that, instead of being on a web URL. That's the only difference. So it is practical to be able to test like that a lot without having to publish all the time. And basically, I have been living in 4 screens with 4 projects open and 3 test windows open at the same time for the last 3 months, doing that all the time. So that's the kind of thing that you will have to do. Now we're going back here. I'm going to remove that from the middle. Okay. So now that you saw the thing actually working for the first time, let's go more in detail how it works. The first part of the magic is here. In all the projects, when you're going to implement the replication, I told you that you needed to do the writing in the file with hadd, hmodify, hdelete. Because of that, there is a collection of global procedure that comes with the project that contain a procedure called hadd, one called hmodify, and one called hdelete. And yes, for those of you coding in French, there is also hajoute, hmodify, and hsupprime. When you do that, any call to hadd, hmodify, hdelete that you already had in your code is automatically going to be redirected to my global procedure. And in there, I'm going, of course, do the real hadd, hmodify, hdelete, but I am also going to do all the things that need to be done for the replication system to work. That is the hook where everything is done to manage your data. And you have absolutely nothing to change in your code for that to work. If you're using hadd, hmodify, hdelete, it will work. It will just go there instead. It will also write everything in the WXReplication file in a format that is ready to travel. I'm sure you remember all the things I told you earlier. So you know that you can either extract the data when you're doing the hadd, hmodify, hdelete, it's the journalization system, or you can extract it later at the time of the replication. It is, in my opinion, much more optimized to do it during the hadd, because the user will never see the time difference of doing 2 hadd instead of 1. But it will see the time difference if when it replicates, it needs suddenly to do 3,000 hadd. So it doesn't change anything in terms of real time use of the machine. But for the user, it will make all the difference in the world. At that point, I'm writing in a memo field, in the text memo field in my WXReplication file, all the information that has to travel for that particular operation. Everything already formatted, already there in one memo field. This means that when I'm doing the replication, I just need to get my record, take all my blocks, put them one after the other, encrypt and send. So everything is done at that level. So the engine, the replication engine on the Windows, or the replication system on the Android side, is working only on WXReplication. It doesn't know any of your file. It doesn't care. It's not his problem. It works on the replication file, and it has all the information it needs in it. And we're going to see in details how that works. Of course, at that point, we know the date and time of the last sync record in UTC, which means that we know exactly where we are. We have one pointer in the WXReplication file that says, was replicated till that date and time. And when we are writing in it, it's a newer date and time, and so it works. if your user reset the clock of the computer back and forth, your replication is going to be completely screwed up. But less and less people are doing that, hopefully. So, and we can detect it in some ways. So there are some things that we can do at that level. So it takes the content and adds it to the packet, and that includes the blobs. It's at this level that I'm taking the file that is inside the memo field, and then I'm transforming it in base 64 in order to be able to send it as text. Then encode, encrypt, do all the thing to make sure that everything is going to be secure, send the packet to the server, and the exact same thing will happen in the other direction. So during the HAD, we extract and prepare the data, and then during the replication cycle, we just take this pre-packaged data, add it one after the other, encrypt, and send. Now, one thing that I wanted to do, and that is not done yet, I wanted before the encryption to zip the string. And that would have been extremely efficient, because when you zip a string of half a megabyte or 2 megabytes or 50 megabytes, it doesn't matter, but it's string information about records, you're going to get between 70 and 99% of compression, depending on the content, which would make the packet that much smaller and the thing that much faster. Unfortunately, zip functions are not available with Android. So right now, not zipped. There is a plan for that, of course. But there is only that many hours in the day, and I still need to have a few paying customers, so I have to alternate a little bit. So there will be improvement. I have, if you look in the list of future improvement of the project, there is a whole thing on optimization. That part is in it, and it's not the only one. There are several places where I know that I can gain probably 80% of the time spent replicating and be 4 or 5 times faster. From what I've seen and what I know, I can go much faster than that. Okay, we are going to enter into the specific, the nitty-gritty. You cannot, as soon as you start implementing the WXReplication, you cannot have any key in your file that is unique except the GUID. That has a lot of weight. So you will have the 2 yellow, the 2 John Smiths, the invoice number that we are talking about. You will have that set up as unique key in your program right now. They cannot be unique key anymore. They have to be key with duplicates. That, no question about that. So, what can you do? You can forbid people from adding a color or modifying the color. Authorizing only one guy to do it, that's in your application. You can use composite key with the database code in it. It's possible. Or you can do, and that is what we should all do that logical duplicate merging, and there will be a module to do that, at least the beginning of it, in the future of WXReplication. The utility windows I was talking to you about earlier contains a pane where you will get a list of all the keys of your analysis that are currently set as unique, that you have to modify to set them as key with duplicate. So you will not have to find out the hard way that a key has not been set correctly. You have a tool to verify that instantly. So, because you cannot have unique keys anymore, what you were doing before is not usable anymore. what you were doing, I'm sure, you were doing HAD. And if you had a duplicate error on the HAD, we are saying, oh no, yellow is already used. You cannot do that. You cannot do that anymore. That's the end. Instead, you're going to do h-read-seek on yellow, local to your database, of course. Check that there's no other yellow before you add your record. That's how it's going to be. Of course, before, and I will be repeating that several times because it is extremely important that you change your mindset about the development. Previously, you were working in hard logic, saying if there is a duplicate, it's an error, cannot erase that. Everybody on the same database, easy to test. Not possible anymore. You're testing locally that there's no duplicate, yes. Doesn't mean that it hasn't been created at the same time on another machine. And there will be a logical duplicate. The key is with duplicate, so they will not create a technical error, but you still will have two yellows. So you will have to manage that. And your logic has to become fuzzy and fault tolerant. Now you may have two yellow and you have to code appropriately. Now, the fact that your application has to change for the replication is not something that is due to WXReplication. All replication systems work like that. There is no way in the world that you can create two records with the same unique identifier and then magically not have a conflict when you replicate. In no replication system is that possible. Of course, it is big in my documentation. It is nowhere to be found in PCSoft documentation. And yet it is true for any kind of a replication system. You're supposed to know that. Now you do. So, the good news is that there will be duplicates. Or is that bad news? I'm not sure, but there will be duplicate in any case. So, will you change yellow to bright yellow? Will you merge the record? We already talked about that. Is John Smith really the same? Are you going to display just the city or the email? How does the user know which one to use? Are you going to implement a merge of record? Who's going to be in charge of that? That is all the question that you're going to have yourself. Now, what is a merging? Two records are the same. One is deleted, the other is kept. Basically, it's that. Of course, all the links that were pointing on the deleted record have to be changed to point to the other one. And of course, also, if you were using a counter, a sum, anything like that in the record, it cannot just be merged. It has to be added or subtracted or whatever you are doing. And one very good example of that is the stock. How many products do you have in your stock? Well, if you're doing that, the very simple way of saying, I have a stock information in my product record, and when I sell something, I remove one, and you try to merge two records, you're going to lose information each time. So you cannot work that way. It's not possible. You have, and that would be true for many other reasons, but you have to have an event file now saying, that was my initial stock, and then there was that was bought, and then sold that. So you will instead replicate the event and not a sum or a deduction each time. Now, you could get away with it in a centralized database. You cannot do this kind of thing when you are replicating. So, of course, you need to manage the link record and replace the grid. When you say it like that, it seems easy, but imagine that you have, and I'm not even talking about invoices, but you have any kind of master-slave relationship in two files. You have a header and lines. And you have your lines that are number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in your document. When you merge the two headers, suddenly you have 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 4, 2, 5. And there is no way that any automated system that I could code could work in all these cases. It's just not possible. So how are we going to manage that? Because there is a solution, of course, and Glenn talked about it yesterday. First, you need to find the duplicates. And that is something that I will be able to code and provide as a utility, something that where you will say, okay, the fields that I want to manage are those that are the duplicate, where it's possible to have duplicate. Loop on the data to find the duplicate. Tell somebody, hey, I have duplicates. What do we do with it? Decide to merge and all that. And then, of course, you need to know who is going to be in charge of that, because that's going to be a so-so job, deciding which record to keep and which one to delete. And then use dynamic compilation. I wrote that before Glenn told me yesterday, and let's be clear about that. But use dynamic compilation to complement the generic code that I will have here with a specific code for each record, each case, each application. It is exactly an example of using the business rules Glenn was talking about. Exactly. That utility is not available yet. It will be available at some point. I don't know when. If somebody needs it now, he can pay me to do it. Absolutely. But again, I have to eat sometimes, and some paying customers are going first. So, of course, as soon as those are popping up, I will update my website, documentation, a new version and all that. You will know that something is going on. I already told you about that. I don't even need my slides anymore. I know everything by heart. Fantastic. Told you all of that already. Yep. Of course, yeah, I didn't tell you that. This is about the stock calculation when you need the event and all that. Of course, if the stock information is local to the database, we're talking about the Paris database, and it's the physical stock that is in Paris. That is synchronizing with the stock in New York, with the physical stock in New York. If you synchronize this kind of information, you can continue to have your counter in your file because it's information that is local to this database. You will just have the name of the database, the name of the stock somewhere in your record, so you won't have any problem. But in any other case, you will need to have an event file for your stock. So, I already talked about that. The users are more easily in different time zone. You have to store the data in UTC, display in local. Now, that is not always true. Does it make sense when you are here to display the fact that somebody in Paris has an appointment at 3 in the morning? When you are displaying his schedule, you may want to display it in his local time in order for it to make sense to you. Doesn't mean that at some point you won't need to know that it's 3 o'clock in the morning for you. But you will not be able to always systematically say, okay, I'm displaying all my times in local time for the local user. That's not true. So that will be a change in your application. Of course, WXReplication for all internal record and data is storing date and time in UTC. And in your records, there is a question, do you need to implement UTC for your date and times or not? Some of my customers are going to tell me, oh, I don't need UTC. All my customers are here. Of course, tomorrow they may open an office in Paris, and suddenly your software doesn't work anymore. Or you may sell to another customer who has people everywhere. So when you say, do you need UTC? Also think, will you need it tomorrow? That may be an investment that you want to make immediately. It may not. This is very easy to do when you're writing information in data, because you're basically doing it during the HAD. You're just doing a local to UTC, UTC to local. When you're writing, it's not a problem. But it's much harder when you're reading information from the file. When you're doing a query, and your query is directly displayed in the table, where do you do the transformation? When you're doing a table link directly to a file, same thing. Where do you do the transformation? When you're doing a file to screen that I've seen everywhere, how do you do the transformation? It's going to push the UTC date and time. So there are tricks, but you will have to go manually in each table. By example, what you can do in your table, you make the date and time invisible, and you create a second date and time that is the local date and time. And in the display of the line, you do your operation. That's one trick. You could also write some crazy SQL code that does the transformation directly in the database, this and that, and then it won't work on this database, that database. There are lots of things to see. Currency problem, it's your app. There's no way I can do anything in the WXReplication code about currency problem. I can just tell you about it. You will have to deal with it in your application. That is something that is completely outside of the purview of that project. Same thing for the language content and UI. I can tell you how I'm doing it. I have a language code in my file, and this is for the display in English, this is for the display in French, and that's it. Currently I'm not managing country, but you could do the same thing per country and both. So that is up to you in your application. Okay, let's talk about the choices that are made. I told you that I was going to explain to you why I chose this way of doing things. I think it's interesting to understand the reasoning so that you can agree or not and say it's a good system for you or not. About the record IDs. There are 3 ways you can manage IDs for a replication system. That I know of, at least. There may be more than that, but I've never heard of anything else. The system that PCSoft is using is the automatic ID. In such a system, the database is in charge of creating automatic ID each time you're adding a record. And you have to tell the database, my local database is going to generate ID in the range of 1 to 1 million. Your local database is going to generate ID in the range of 1,000,001 to 2 million. And so on and so forth for each database. In the case of GUID, I don't know what crazy mathematician guy invented that thing, but supposedly, when you generate a GUID, it is unique at the level of the universe. How can you prove that mathematically is way above my pay grade. I really have no clue. But it seems that you can generate a GUID your whole life and never have a duplicate. I didn't believe it at the beginning, so I made a program that was creating GUID like crazy and adding them in a file with a unique ID. And about 3 weeks later, still no problem. I say, okay, that must be true. It's magic. That, if anybody can explain that to me, yes, you can. Yeah, but that doesn't. Actually, it's not. That was the first implementation of the GUID. The central part of the GUID was based on the card number. The second implementation of the GUID, the one that is used now, is completely mathematical and is not based on that at all. Not anymore. I've researched the thing to try to understand it, and I know the theory. I just don't understand it. mathematically not too much for me. The third way of doing this kind of thing is the composite key. In that case, you're going for each record to have a database ID plus the record ID. Of course, in that case, the record ID cannot be automatic. Because if it was automatic, then we would be in that case. So this record ID now has to be managed by you. And it can be anything. It can be the customer name. It can be the company code. It can be whatever you want. But you have to manage it in your program. So my choice was to use the GUID. And this is why. First, it is extremely simple and easy to generate a GUID. We have a function for that. And it's available everywhere as far as I know. And to add it automatically in HAD. What I'm doing, I'm intercepting your HAD with my global procedure. And then in there, I'm saying, OK, where's the GUID field? Push the GUID in it, done. So it's extremely easy. It's done. You have nothing to do in your program about that. The automatic IDs trick that they're using with the range per database may or may not be supported in the database that you will want to use tomorrow. I don't know. I have no way of knowing all the database, and if they support an automatic ID in a range, would SQLite do that? I don't know. So can we rely on something that we don't know is going to work with all database that we may need? In my opinion, no. The composite key system needs an ID per record, and that is going to be in your code. I cannot implement that in an automatic way. You would have to code that for each record added in your project, which means that it would be forbidden. You would forget it somewhere, and it would crash the system. So the only system that would work, in my view, for this kind of thing is the GUID. Of course, I decided to go replication at the field level. So only the modified fields are transported. When you add a record, it's all the fields, clearly. But when you modify something, only those are transported. And even though this reduces the chance of conflict, there will be some. And in that case, last in wins. And that's it. Now, there shouldn't be a problem because you have a way with that system to keep the history. Conflict will be few and far between because it's only on the field of a record. And with last in win, it happens only from time to time. So that last in win is the only real-life workable system I've tried. There's no way you are hitting the user wall, and the user wall is impenetrable. You cannot do anything at that level. Nobody is there to know what to do, and no user ever knew which version of info to choose, ever. Even I get confused when I get the message saying, you have this and you have that, what do you want? I don't know why the guy changed that. You would need at least to display the name of the guy, the phone number of the guy, his email, put a link to have a video conference with the guy, have the answer immediately, because during that time, you have to validate now. So it's just not workable. The extraction of data, I told you, is done during the HAD, HModify, HDelete directly, so that it goes faster during the replication system. It increases only slightly the operation during the writing. It's not accessible by the user. It saves time. And the result of that is that each H operation that you have that adds a record in my replication system. It's either a record of add type, edit type, or delete type with the corresponding information. But each time you add a record in your main application, edit or whatever, it has a record in my replication file. As a result, you have a built-in history system available because I'm journaling everything. You can use that directly if you want. I told you that the application cannot use the update queries. You remember why? You would update somebody else's data without them knowing. It's not a good idea. There is no change to do in your application at the level of hadd, hmodified, hdelete because my global procedure overwrites the W language function, so you're good to go. And the code automatically adds the GUIDs, date and times, and all that. I have a series of fields that you have to add in each record. This is in the how-to guide also, so you will see that no big deal there. You have the GUID, you have the created by, modified by, created the date time, and modified date time in each record, which you should have already, because that's something that you really need basically everywhere. But you will have them now, in any case. Now, for the transport, I told you that you need to decide on how you're going to format your data when you send it. I decided to do it using a proprietary file format, but that's not the only solution that was available. One way of doing this kind of thing would have been to use halias and hcopy record. What you would do with that, you would create on the fly a second file like your customer file. It would be the alias customer file, and copy the record from there to here. At that point, when you want to replicate, you take the whole customer alias file, you send it up, and you do the same thing in the other direction. It is possible. I did that at some point for an application, but it needs the same analysis exactly on both sides. My system does not. You can have different analysis on both sides of the replication if you want. It's possible. We could use XML and just say, okay, we're going to put everything in an XML file and send it that way. Unfortunately, XML may or may not work in all environments. This is a high-level function, and I'm trying to push that in every environment that is available in the PCSoft tool, and that is not available or not compatible everywhere. Serialize. You've seen that serialize has been used during the presentation yesterday for those of you who were there, or this morning, I'm not sure. Same thing. It may or may not work in all environments. And believe me, I've seen cases where there are problems. But that's not all. May or may not work, that's one thing. But all three are okay if you're working in the full record. But how do you serialize one field or two fields of a record? When you're working on the field level, you need to be able to send only this field and that field. Serialize will never do that. Also, this system may or may not support blobs. How do you put a blob into an XML file? Will it work? Will it work everywhere? Maybe, maybe not. But I was not ready to spend 3 months coding and then finding that iOS doesn't support it. So that one thing that is sure is that this system will never support external blobs, external documents. With my system, with my proprietary file format, I'm taking the content of the blob, transforming it in base 64, and sticking it in my chain. If it's an external file, read the file, base 64, stick it in the chain, I do exactly the same thing. XML, external file, doesn't know what it is. So you cannot have an automated process there. Also, these three systems will not support different analysis on the two sides. If you do a serialize on one side, and you do deserialize on the other, the structure, the file, whatever you're working on has to be exactly the same. Otherwise, it doesn't know where to put what. With my system, if a field is not there, by example, your server is updated, you have 2 new fields, and there's a new record coming from the client. I'm working field by field. I'm going to do H reset of the record with the 2 new fields and put the content that is coming in. And it will work without any problem. Now, if I delete fields, I haven't tested that part, and I just need to add a few tests to say if it's not there, just ignore it and all this kind of thing. But I can, with that, with my system, I can easily support having different versions of analysis on both sides, or even completely different files. As long as the field names are the same, file name, field names identical, you have 23 more fields on that database, it will work. It is not tested yet, but it is made to work that way without any problem. Yes? Okay? So my solution will work in all cases, and I'm going to show you an example on how it works. This is a beautiful example, real example, of my data format. It is a very simple name-value system. It is a system that is used by lots of new NoSQL database systems that are working only like that, allow you to create or have different set of fields in different database. It's extremely used. So it is name-value or INI-like. It's based, you have a field, something, and its value. That's all. This format is managed automatically for you by my param low class. You can see the name of the class, CL for class, WXR to say this is one of the class of the WXReplication. So you won't have the same name in your program to avoid conflict. And this is the real name of the class. And this is a class that I've been using for, in one way or another, perhaps 15 years now. I've been using it for everything in the kitchen sink. It's incredibly powerful. I manage all my parameters this way. You can use it for tons of things. So it's basically parameter name equal value, and the CR, the carriage return, is the end of the line, is the end of that. How do you manage carriage return in the data? It's just replaced by something that is not a carriage return, it is a special marker, that's all. If we look at the content of that record, we can see here the WX record info. That is my internal cooking. I have all my system information telling me that this record has this GUID, is created date and time, modified date and time, that it is an add record. So that is from an HAD in your program. And because it's an HAD in the program, the list of fields that is here is basically the full list of fields that were in the file that sent that. And here I have US caption equal, that's this one. Then US parent family GUID here. Then DT created date here, and so on and so forth. So when I read that on the other side, first I get that thing. I get the list of fields that is here, loop on it, extract each value, set it in the record, each add, done. And that will work on any database. It will work in the analysis is different. As long as you have the file name, field name identical, it will work. That is a given. So with that, basically, universal. Yeah.
Field that looks like a date field.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand. I'm pretty sure I don't understand the question, in fact.
Okay. In my out database, I have a field that I've declared as text.
Mm-hmm.
But I store some data in that text field that looks like a date.
It's your problem. It's a text field for the database. It's a text field on the other side of the database too. I don't care what's in it.
Okay, but you're transporting everything as text, so what if it's a currency variable? How does it?
Your field is text. So I'm taking the text and putting it there. If it's numeric, I'm converting it to text and putting it here. I'm using the field type information to manage it correctly. And one example is there. Blob photo. This is a binary blob, really a binary memo. And what do I do in it? I do a special process, of course, in my code. I said, okay, it's binary. It is this file here with everything that is in the H bitmap info information that I need to put back here. And then I have here, encoded in base 64, the file itself. It is truncated for readability because, as you can see, I've removed for, otherwise it wouldn't fit on the screen. But this is an image right there. So that it doesn't matter if the type of field is supported by your database, then I will get a type and it will be managed automatically. And on the other direction, I'm putting in the same field, so the type will be the same. Of course, if you have two different databases, you have the same file name, field name, but the type of the field is different on each side, that's entirely up to you. I don't know what will happen in that case. I think I'm pretty much done on that one. No, this is what I'm creating when I'm doing the HAD. I'm creating the whole thing here, including that WX separator. That is the end of record. So I just have after that to take that, add it after the other, add it after the other, add it. I don't even have to manage separator. It's already there. So this whole thing tells me everything I need to know for the next step, which is the transport. When I'm doing the CRC, in the CRC utility that I've written, I am calculating the CRC on the whole file, not on this. It's, I could, and I have some code that calculates the CRC, of course, per record before doing the next record and so on. So I have the code already written per record, and if I need to, I can build a better function for the CRC. That is my future list also, where I will send a list of record ID CRC, and it will compare directly by the replication cycle to do an automatic check that all the records that have been sent are exactly the same. And so you can do lots of things. Yes? There's no need to have an end of file separator because at that point we're not working on the file.
The file's done.
This is just a string that is inside a text memo.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. When you were going along, how do you start? You said it running locally. You're using windev. You have to run something to get WXadmin to run.
I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
The WXadmin, you had to get it to run so that it would execute the pages for you. So you ran something very briefly so it would fire up on your local.
On the WebDev side, yeah.
Yeah. How do you fire that up on a WebDev server?
On the WebDev server, not on the test mode?
Not in the test mode, in production mode.
It is the WebDev server.
No, but it's always running there. There's never any page that's going to be accessed, or you just include your pages in the project. And that's what fires.
Yeah, absolutely. The two WP pages that I'm using here have to be included in your WebDev site.
So you have to include those two pages, and that's what closes the server.
If you have a WebDev site, because you can use that without a WebDev site by just using my two pages. You don't need a WebDev site to use that. You can, but
okay. But so in other words, your remote machine is accessing a WebDev site,
Yeah.
which is executing the replication.
In fact, it's accessing one WebDev page at WP Connect.
Okay, so at the replication, at the base level, can you replicate just a single file out of a group of files that you normally replicate?
Absolutely.
And a single field?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so why wouldn't you get your time off of the server then, before you start?
Because at the time when you're trying to do that, the server may or may not answer. I'm preparing the data at the time of when I'm doing the HAD, not when I'm sending the data.
Is that under the journaling method or under the?
Yeah.
I mean, could you just, if you were doing it, assuming you were syncing, couldn't you just say, go give me the time? Oh, I don't get the time, I can't send right now, I'm not synced.
Yeah, sure, you could. But there are other reasons why I chose not to do it that way.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
I'm asking why you didn't choose it that way.
Yeah, there are many reasons why. It will be much slower for the user. And that's a big thing.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome. We're going to continue tomorrow, go deeper in the details. And we are at about, let me see, we have about 10 more slides. So that's going to be about maybe one hour or something like that. And then we're going to start reading the source code and starting on integrating WXReplication. So if you haven't downloaded the project yet, please do so before tomorrow, because tomorrow you're going to need it.